Hello again, book lovers. It's John Prebble's turn today, and I have just read Glencoe. I bought this in a charity shop in Oxford. A marvellous experience to be browsing the sections you might be interested in and find a John Prebble book for £1.99. Well, I'll have that. It fell apart as I read it. It's in my hands now without any covers. And the index is about to peel off as well. But I like that. It means it's been read. Two books inspired me to read history. One was Noah Kramer's book on Sumer, and I've followed that thread of interest ever since. And the other one was John Prebble's book on Culloden, which I thought was magnificent, and I recommend. This book takes another slice of Scottish history, in which the English always seem to be mixed up, and tells us the sad story of the massacre of Glencoe. This is an event which is shrouded in legend. It's the story of the Campbells and the MacDonalds fighting. It's the story of the treachery of the Lowlanders, or the English, or King William. It's hard to know. The hero of the piece seems to be John Hill, who sits up there on the new fort at Fort William, freezing while the politics takes place in London. And one of those throwaway lines, which is why I love to read history, talks about him sitting there up in the freezing north and says, his fire was always lit, but he was always cold. So yes, he's rich enough to have the fire always lit, but the poor guy's not in good shape. In the end, gets politicked out of existence. On the other side, we're invited into the hut of one of the clan leaders, which appear from the outside to be pretty much wattle and daub. But once you're in there, blimey, there's some nice furniture, a Welsh dresser, lovely bottles of whiskey, all kinds of treats. Not what you'd imagine in a hovel. Now, MacDonalds, Campbells, it's not that simple. There are many tribes and clans marauding over the Scottish hills at that point. There was one passage in the book that made me think I was reading about the Mongols, as even in the 17th and up to the 18th century there were clans that lived basically via tribal warfare and stealing cattle. One such clan was known as the Gallows Herd, was particularly feared, and they formed the centrepiece of the Glencoe massacre. Now, it's a stodgy book, I have to admit. I found the politics very dense, the cast of characters difficult to follow, and even some of the Scottish names, at times, seem to be as difficult as the Russian ones when you're reading a Russian novel. So I would say, of these 270 pages of narrative, it really kicks off at about page 150. And when we get to chapter 4, Murder Under Trust, which is the actual event of Glencoe, suddenly the book kicks off into a McFlurry of violent activity. And it's in this chapter where you get some of the great stories. The treachery, the bold escapes, the misery of the escapees, tales abounding that the soldiers knew what were going to happen, some of them refused to do it. A tale which turned out to be true in the end. And then after that, repercussions of the massacre, everybody trying to jostle for position under the broad seal, is the title of the chapter, leading us to Glencoe in his face, where, in the manner of one of those biopic films, and one of my favourite bits really, you find out what happened to everybody in the end. I recommend John Prebble. I wouldn't recommend this book unless you're really interested in Glencoe. I would recommend Culloden, and there's more Prebble to come.